Mike and Chris, you can take it away.
All right. I'll have a few minute introduction, and then Chris and Ken will get pretty technical pretty quickly. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Chamath Palihapitiya, but he mentioned a couple of weeks ago that exploding AI workloads bring skyrocketing cloud bills, data sovereignty risks, and unpredictable pricing, driving companies to reclaim control, cost predictability, performance through on-premise infrastructure. And about 5 years ago, many of our clients migrated some storage and compute to remote and cloud data centers due to a sudden change to their remote working environments. Most of our customers have a 3 to 5 year upgrade cycle, and some even longer. What people in the storage business call repangaea, on-site, moving back from colo and cloud to on-premises, started about 2 years ago and has accelerated with the need for local AI and the price increases and more frequent outages from our customers' cloud providers. We have a little ditty we laugh about. Old MacDonald had a server farm with a duck here, a switch there, and a piglet over there. And as the outages at the big and small cloud and colo providers increased last year, the intensity of the calls and emails we received asking how quickly we could help folks move back from the cloud increased. And each reported outage with AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, Cloudflare increased the number of quotes for migration and hardware support we received. Surprisingly, the cloud outages have caused our engineering customers to point out that their managers did not seem to understand that when you outsource your data and its security, you may end up with some problems with data security and the cost of remote applications and storage. So our customers are telling us that insourcing their storage and compute has a 6-month to 9-month ROI over cloud costs. Obviously, your mileage will vary. By the end of last year, we were sending out proposals to help our customers migrate from VMware to Proxmox regularly. Our simple converged solutions are in the right place at the right time for customers that need to bring their data home from the cloud providers that have unpredictable pricing, fees, security, and quality of service. After we successfully helped a customer move their environment back from the hinterlands, an old engineering customer told us how their manager took credit for the successful migration and cost savings. Bosses like cost savings. Engineers like the ability to work on equipment that is safe, secure, and local. The finance and risk folks like the ROI and benefits of rapid depreciation on hardware. So now we'll begin a short presentation followed by Ask Ken Anything session on Proxmox, system security, costs, and migrations. Todd, I took that picture from Google Maps. Okay, so we've been using FileMaker since 2004. As our business grew, we recognized that we needed a completely relational ERP system for inventory, purchasing, engineering tickets, engineering projects, manufacturing, shipping, quoting, service policies, bills of materials, and CRM for customers and prospects. And of course, we keep all notes and records on incoming orders, quotes, historical email, and documents. And so we needed a high-performance FileMaker server and remote mirroring. That's when our engineers began tinkering. I started writing MRP programs in PIC in 1982, and we actually have a PIC customer in Nebraska. I then wrote DBase 3 and 4 and FoxPro MRP systems for companies to 1989. In 1989, I started my own business writing MRP programs. As the internet became more prominent, my customers wanted me to solve their networking and connectivity issues. We got involved in load balancing and storage in the late 90s, and during the financial panic of 2008, 3 of our customers asked us to build them a storage solution, which became the SimplStor project. Our FileMaker solution has grown as our business has grown. We have about 3.5 million records and about 800 tables with about 5,300 fields. linked by 421 relationships and 16.5 gig of direct FileMaker database files. We also have over 87,000 externally stored container files, about 37 gig managed by 1,769 scripts and 1,696 layouts. Since we keep everything related to system logs, emails, attachments, contracts, etc., we have a lot of storage in our associated documents. We believe in security, and we remote replicate our data between our data centers. In the summer of 2025, I met the folks at the Dallas FMburgh group meeting and started talking to them about our SimplStor PE, which we developed for our FileMaker server requirements, because we could not find an enterprise-level FileMaker solution that would work as an enterprise VM host in our infrastructure. Over lunch after that meeting, we discussed our hardware solutions at Proxmox, and they asked me a bunch of questions. I was surprised to learn that our hardware design engineering was not part of FileMaker developers' tool sets. In the enterprise storage and server business, we mostly work with IT managers and engineers. Zerowait is known for outstanding customer service and support. And recently we were speaking to a NASCAR team we have been working with for over 20 years about their migration from Nutanix and VMware to our simple converged solution of SimplStor and Proxmox. Our friend Steve had a concept for a turnkey SimplStor FileMaker solution he refers to as just add water. And he would like us to build our SimplStor solutions for his company with the standard templates for the OVAs that his customers typically require for their on-premises FileMaker and AI requirements. Since the folks at FileMaker don't have a full definition of what an enterprise FileMaker server should be hosted on, our engineers have built a set of hardware and Proxmox solutions that fill this market niche. At this point, Chris is going to take over the presentation and is going to get progressively more technical. And then we'll ask Ken, then Ken's going to have an Ask Anything session about 8 topics which are connected to the FileMaker environment. Chris?
Thanks, Mike. So this is how we start a project at Zerowait. We have a ticket that's created via our ticketing system in FileMaker. We receive client requests for a new SimplStor X14 and NVMe system. So the X14 is really our internal naming for the motherboard type. It helps us designate which family it sits in. We open an engineering ticket and review the infrastructure requirements. We designed the SimplStor X14 NVMe using a FileMaker blueprint quote that we built and developed. We quote the box, we build it, test, validate all the components, and then we configure that system to the specific needs for our clients. So there are really just 2 types of people in the world. So for the nerds in the room, you should get that one. Maybe, but a few of us hold a few different titles, like biker, martial arts instructor, rescue training instructor, dog dad, human dad. Yes, dog dad is in front of human dad. If you knew my boys, you'd know why. And the keeper of the ones and zeros at Zerowait. So I've been in IT since the late 90s, spent a few years at Dell Plus focusing on server customization. Spent 6 years at NetApp as an engineer, 4.5 at EMC as a regional pre-sales resource, and then worked in the global competitive group. Spent a few years working at startups, and I've been at Zerowait since 2013. So we get the question a lot, why do we build the FileMaker Performance Server? We couldn't find a commercially available turnkey solution. So as a company of storage and networking engineers, we just decided to build it ourselves. So to better understand where we're at today, first we need to cover a little bit of history. So in the beginning, we're a mix of X8 and X9 versions of our VM hosts. And again, that's the version of the motherboard, so it's quite a few years old. We replaced the X8 hosts over time, arriving at our current environment. Movement to the X14 was really driven by us adding features to our FileMaker server. So we added automated ticket creations for level 1 events, exception reporter, which we brought into FileMaker from an external app, automated fault detection and reporting. All of our client logs are processed within FileMaker, and a simple report is sent out to our clients. We built a quoting tool with the ability to create predefined templates for supported builds, and all of our email marketing and tracking resides within there as well. All of our data resides locally. It's all safe, secure, and it's local. So this really busy slide right here, this flow chart outlines our data handling within FileMaker. So from auto support emails to the rule editor, ticket management to client emails, this is a very high level overview of our process flow within FileMaker. Steve Augenbaugh, the brilliant individual that designed a lot of this, he worked and helps us do most of our FileMaker development. So we've got a lot of timers that run the durations of our scripts. So when we were reading through our weekly logs, there were some of those that took between 5 and 9 minutes to process per log. When we moved to the X14 platform, we saw the same logs were now taking just under 2 to 3 minutes. That's about 3 times faster on average. The thing is, all of our systems, our FileMaker, are on virtual machines. So when we migrated them over, we didn't change anything. We didn't change the number of vCPUs. We didn't change the amount of memory, nothing. Literally, the only thing we did was vMotion from a different platform to the X14, and we saw a 3x increase. So we thought that was significant. So when we talk to our clients, there's a few challenges that they come up when looking at infrastructure. One's cost. So VMware, with its recent challenges, has become fairly price prohibitive. No more perpetual licensing. Sometimes there's a 72 core minimum for purchases on many products, massive increases to renewal pricing. Another, security. Cloud has had a few challenges lately. So CrowdStrike back in July 24, Google Cloud in June 25, AWS in October, Microsoft Azure in October, Cloudflare in November 25, and the list just keeps growing and growing. Our experience adding the X14 system to our environment led us to believe that developers and clients could also benefit from its flexibility as well as its versatility. Since our focus has always been to provide safe, secure, and local solutions to our clients, we began looking in different directions. So one of our developers, Ken Irwin, who's actually on the call today, suggested we should take a look at Proxmox. Since it's a fully open source and it's free to download and install, there's also an option for paid enterprise support. Proxmox is unique in that it has native ZFS support. More on this in a little bit. So we decided to go ahead and take another look. And what do we find out? I'm so glad you asked. So Proxmox is a type 1 hypervisor just like VMware, meaning it installs directly on your computer's hardware, not on top of another operating system like Windows or Mac OS. It supports both VMs and containers, unlike VMware that only supports virtual machines. With the latest versions, Proxmox also supports encapsulated Docker containers, and all of this functionality is deployable from a common web GUI. Proxmox comes with a web-based graphical interface, easy for me to say, and that makes it easy to manage your virtual environment, storage, networking, settings, and updates from any web browser.
No.
Proxmox also allows you to dynamically allocate resources like CPU power, memory, disk space, and even GPUs, enabling you to set limits and priorities to ensure that your applications run smoothly. All right, so what is ZFS and why do I care? That's a great question. So ZFS is an open source advanced file system and a logical volume manager originally developed by Sun Microsystems. So instead of maintaining individual drives, ZFS creates a pool from all of your drives. This pool acts as a single large storage space, and you can easily add more drives to expand it later. It also provides you copy and write. And what that is when you change a file, ZFS doesn't overwrite the original data. So it writes the new data to a new location and updates the pointers to the new data. What this means is your data is never corrupted by power failure or crashed during a write operation. And if something goes wrong, the system can revert to the last known good state. You don't need to run an FSCK or file system check. It is self-healing. It constantly checks the integrity of your data using checksums. And if it finds a corrupted block on the drive, it can automatically self-heal. Snapshots are phenomenal within ZFS. They're instant, space-efficient, point-in-time copies of your data. Allows you to easily roll back from a previous state if you accidentally delete a file, mess up a config. They're also read-only, and therefore they're not susceptible to ransomware attacks. So we're seeing a lot of those lately. And because snapshots by design are immutable, you don't have to worry about ransomware being able to block those. ZFS is also very efficient when it comes to replication for backups and DR. One of the most noteworthy attributes about ZFS integration with Proxmox is this. Regardless of the operating system, any VM stored within a ZFS pool can benefit from the snapshots. It doesn't matter if it's Windows, Linux, Ubuntu, it could be NTFS, exe4, it doesn't matter. They all benefit from ZFS snapshot capability. So as we mentioned earlier, we've been working with FileMaker developer and our friends with the Just Add Water build. So this is an example of what one might look like. So here we have 6 virtual machines running on the X14. We have FileMaker server. We have a server running RDP or RDAC, a LAMP server, an AI RAG server, a system for AI training, and a FileMaker worker node. Running several systems under Proxmox provides a number of benefits: lower hardware costs, better utilization, operational management, flexibility, scalability, and high availability, and the ability to create HA clusters. The bottom line is this: with the Just Add Water build, you can reduce server count by 60 to 80%. You reduce power, cooling, and admin time by 50 to 70% on average. Allows you to provision resources in minutes, not weeks. And it protects your data using high availability, DR, and live migrations. So now we're going to do a little demo of one of the capabilities of Proxmox and ZFS. So here we have the administrative console for Proxmox along with a couple of VMs. FileMaker Server running on Windows 2022 and FileMaker Pro running on Windows 11. The GUI is really clean and straightforward, easy to use, since everything is laid out logically. Makes it easy to navigate. Now, let me show you how easy it is to create a ZFS pool in which you can store your VMs. So here you simply select a server, then go under Disks, then go to ZFS. Click ZFS, give the pool a name. I'm really original, so I just call it Test. For demo purposes, we're going to create a 2-disk RAID 1. So select 2 available drives, click the Create button, and it's done. It's just as simple as that. Now, it's just as simple to delete a ZFS pool. Let me show you how. So here we're going to go to the server. Since we're already in the ZFS section of disks, we're going to select the pool you want to remove, click More, then Destroy. We're going to add, as a safety precaution, the ID to confirm the removal. Click the Remove button, and it's done. Just as simple as that. Now, before I show you how all of this is going to enrich the lives of all those here in person, remote, and the millions of people watching this later on YouTube, let's start with a little restore. Since we're an infrastructure company, we tend to do a ton of testing. And during testing, we often blow stuff up looking for better ways to do things. And typically that's me blowing stuff up. So doing a full restore of all of our FileMaker databases would take quite a bit of time. And if we missed a step, we often ended up having to run a verify on one of the databases. So we created a tool that would make sure we didn't forget any steps. So this is what you're going to see as we do a full restore from our previous backup. So here we're going to go back to our FileMaker server. We're going to open up our FileMaker Tools app. As we're waiting for the mouse to move, there it is. It's set up so that it displays the server name to help us validate the system we're about to perform the restore. It's also site aware, so it uses, if it's used in our DR facility, it looks for the replicated systems. So we're going to choose update. We're answer yes. We're going to choose to recover all of the databases. Now we're going to look for the appropriate backup. We're going to use test. All of the databases are now closed and removed. And this is using all regular FileMaker commands. Then the databases from the backup location are going to be copied over to the FileMaker server. Now we've compressed the time on the copy. We don't want everybody sitting here watching paint dry. Once the copy is finished, the databases are opened, and the tool is going to verify that the number of databases that are open are the same number that exists on the server. Once everything is finished, timer is going to pop up and show us the total time for the restore. And survey says 4 minutes and 1 second. So now we can go back to the admin console and look to see that All 13 of our databases are open and available. Now we're going to show you one of the benefits of ZFS snapshots. So as we mentioned before, the power and versatility of ZFS snapshots can benefit any flavor of operating system running as a VM on Proxmox within a ZFS pool. So here we're going to go over to the Proxmox console. We're going to select the server, go down to snapshots. We're going to click the Take a Snapshot button, and you'll notice the Include RAM checkbox. We're going to make sure that's checked. What this does is allows us to copy the system state at the moment that you're creating the snapshot. It takes a little bit of time to copy the RAM for the system state, but it's going to allow us to bring the system back to that state after a rollback. We compress the time here as well. Overall, it took about 5 minutes to copy the RAM plus a near instant snapshot from GFS. And there we go. So now that we've got a good snapshots, we're going to go medieval and create a little bit of havoc and delete some FileMaker databases. So now we're going to go into the admin console. We're going to close all of our databases. There we go. And now we're going to go in and just delete the entire directory structure within all of the databases. So we're just going to go into Explore, Program Files. Everybody knows this route. FileMaker Server, Data, Databases. And we're just going to select everything and just whack it. And just to make sure, we're going to empty the recycle bin. So now if we go back to the admin console and take a look, somebody's not going to have a good day. But wait, we have a snapshot. So let's go back to the Proxmox console and to our snapshot section. We're going to go to the Select Snapshot button that we want. We're going to click Rollback. We're going to confirm that we really want to do it. And the rollback begins. We've compressed the time again. Total time for the rollback is just under 3 minutes. And we're done. Now let's see what we've got. So we're going to go check our FileMaker server, and because we saved the system state with a RAM option, the server's online and all the databases are mounted and open. And we're going to verify that by going to one of our clients and open up one of our databases, and shows that we connect right away. Now, if we go back to the admin console, we can see that we've got that connection to the database established, and we're all good to go. So this is just one of the features that Proxmox is able to provide for any operating system. So the X14 system is a flexible enterprise solution that doesn't break the bank. It can support up to 256 plus performance cores or higher E-cores per node, up to 50% improvement uplift in compute intensive tasks, and it's optimized for the latest NVIDIA, Intel, and AMD GPUs. Runs PCIe 5 and supports up to 400 gigabit networking options. This box reduces hosting costs for scaling FileMaker and enables on-prem scaling without having to refresh hardware. So this is a copy of our blueprint tool within FileMaker. It's integrated with our inventory, pulls cost and customer info to create our quotes. So here are a few things that our clients focus on. So we're going to go through a couple of these cards and make some comments, and then Ken's going to do a short demo for us. So AI is one of the things that our clients talk to us about. And Ken's coming in, so we're going to admit him, or Rick is. Zerowait can help with AI issues by avoiding cloud volatility, hidden fees, and dependency on external providers. Enables high performance on-premises AI processing, eliminates bottlenecks, reduces costs, and expands infrastructure, and accelerates disk or data-intensive tasks with fast, reliable storage. Virtualization is another area that we can help out. There is a document that's out on our website talking about different ways to reclaim control of your virtualization strategy. You can find that out. or find that listed out on Zerowait.com. And we've got this very stern looking guy over here. He's stern because cloud's having issues again. So there's been a few challenges. So breaches, Microsoft hiding key data flow information in plain sight. We've had AWS, Wired magazine's been getting on the bandwagon. Cloud's had a few challenges. Zerowait can help with service and support. We can also extend your hardware obsolescence and in the support by supporting those boxes that are a little bit longer in the tooth and maintain those values, hardware reliability and failures. We can also assist with network and integration issues. We can support gaps and high vendor costs, as well as help with performance and scalability bottlenecks. We have a cost document that's out on our website as well. It's a cost comparison between VMware and Proxmox. And even though the SANS isn't there anymore, we liked it. But Zerowait's also created a cost-effective modular product offering, starting from the foundation level all the way to enterprise. Clients this way have a wide range of choices on which to tailor their specific needs. So we move from the foundation, professional, and enterprise systems, and they gradually get larger, more CPUs, more RAM, based on your individual client needs. And one of the things that we can help is breaking you free from that VMware cost. It's huge. I have no idea why they upgraded, just raise their costs across the board. It just, VMware was already expensive and now it's almost price prohibitive. We can also, we don't lock in vendors with Proxmox. There's native support for both VMs and lightweight containers, advanced storage options, a ZFS and Ceph. And also there's certain workloads that are really well done within Proxmox. It also works for Nutanix. Cost licensing, no lock-in, flexibility, hardware flexibility and compatibility, built-in containers, and flexibility within the storage architecture. So Ken is going to show us a short demonstration on how to migrate a VMDK over to Proxmox.
All right.
Cool.
What Chris had showed you earlier was a basic Proxmox setup. This is a Proxmox cluster here. This one of the things that we do is not just virtualize the VMs and containers, but also virtualize the storage as well. So we set up storage as container infrastructure within Proxmox, and that allows us to be able to do replication between nodes. So if you look at, say, this media share, this container is sharing both NFS and CIFS. And if we look at it, it has a replication agreement with another server. And then this is replicating from NAS B to NAS A every 15 minutes. And it can be even lower than that. Then this is also based on the ZFS stuff, where ZFS is actually doing delta change. So what you're actually replicating is only the change data, not the entire array. So that allows us, this media one is actually 14 terabytes, and it can replicate that every 15 minutes. It can actually replicate every 5 if I want to.
So can you show us the demo for the VMDK import?
Sure. So if you want to import stuff directly from VMware, what we do is we set up our storage. In this case, our VM's NFS. We look at this and look at what content types we have here. We have ISO images, backups. We also have import. The import part is the important part here. Within that storage, then we have an import directory. You look in this import directory. You don't have to do this the command line. You can just import the stuff over. We see that we have a VMDK for Ansible and a VMDK for a domain controller, and these are both directly from a VMware environment. So now if we go to one of our compute nodes, we'll take this PMX10 and they create a VM. Give it a name. We'll do the Ansible one. For the purposes of this, so we don't really care about any of this, although we don't use any media because we're going to be importing the media. So then for system information, we don't care about that. So then when I was looking at disks, it pre-allocates a disk for us. We don't care about that because we're going to import our own. So if we go into VM NFS, select the image, we're going to pick our Ansible image. We're going to put that also on VM NFS. We'll just leave it at the defaults here. Use a virtualized NIC and create. You see this 106 pops up. It has a lock on it because it's creating it. So we wait for this create to finish up. Which can take anywhere from a minute or a few.
And while we're doing these imports, we typically put the system down, correct? We'll run them offline, so we'll shut the system down and then do the import. That way we've got all the current information.
Correct. So if we're bringing it over from VMware, we shut the machine down in VMware, bring the VMDK over, and then import it into Proxmox.
And we're actually working with a customer. Actually, Chris and I have a meeting tomorrow with a customer who needs to do this to move from VMware to Proxmox. And the savings on licensing alone is over $120,000 a year.
It's significant, yeah.
Now, is there a limit on the size of VM that you can pull over, or as long as there's enough resources?
Enough resources, you can bring it over.
Okay.
One of the things that, while we're waiting for this, we can also talk about is Proxmox containers. So one of the things that Proxmox does that VMware does not is
It's done, Chris. It's done, Ken.
Okay. So now if we go to that 106, go to the console of that 106, we have a start. We can just start up and it'll just boot up.
And why this is so important is that we can while we're doing the migration for our customer, we can verify step by step what's going on.
And this is all native stuff too, right, Ken?
Yeah, and this isn't sped up. This is real time. So this is how long it actually takes to migrate from a VMware environment to a Proxmox environment.
So you were saying about containers.
Containers is an even more efficient way of creating a virtual environment. So containers, instead of running a full hypervisor, in order to run the application and the OS, you in a container, you just partition it off of the host operating system. So there's no hypervisor involved. You're not virtualizing, or you're not simulating hardware at all. It runs in the native environment, so it's much more efficient.
How does that compare with Docker containers or Dockers?
The Docker is you're abstracting the application more and more. As you get into Docker, you start abstracting the application from the OS even more. And within Proxmox, you can also do Docker containers. What Docker containers, how they operate in Proxmox is it wraps it in a Proxmox container, and then you can just bring in native Docker images straight into Proxmox. Also of note from a FileMaker perspective, all the operating systems that FileMaker runs on can also run in this environment. So we have Ubuntu here, we have Windows Server. And while it's not officially supported by Apple, we can even do Macs. So we have virtualized Macs here as well.
So can you talk a little bit about you touched on a little bit more as far as the affinity and gravity and returning to the name servers for things like containers for fault tolerance and flexibility?
Sure. So let's just take the machine that we just created, this Ansible server, and say that, and this is not part of an affinity agreement right now, but if we want to migrate this, we can just migrate this to another host. So if we want to migrate this to our O2O compute node, this will just migrate over. And so if you look at the O2O, you'll see that this will pop up here. We have the arrow showing that it's in migration. Now the arrow goes away and now it's there. So now this is running on a different host. And it did that without interrupting the flow of that machine at all. It's been up the entire time. Now we have, say, this host, which has an affinity agreement, and if we want to take this and migrate this one over to O2O.
So what's an affinity agreement?
Affinity agreement is a gravity, okay, that
host.
returns a host back to its preferred host. So if that host is available, it will always return that virtual environment back to the host that we originally stuck it on. When we can say O2O is the secondary host that we would do, okay, or we could say O30 or O40, okay, and we can set priorities among all four of those. So if 10 is available, we will always run on 10. If 10 is not available, it'll run on 20. If 10 and 20 are not available, it'll run on 30.
So if one of the hosts goes down, then it'll go to whichever the next one in that list.
Correct.
And then when the host is repaired, comes back up, everything syncs back and is up to date, then it moves back. Is that how the affinity works?
Correct. So if we force a migration here on this machine, and again, you'll see it pop up on O2O. And because it has an affinity agreement and 10 is available, it returns home again. So this machine is actually migrated from the 10 host to the 20 host and back again, because that's what our affinity agreement tells it to do. And all the time, okay, it's been up the entire time. So this machine has actually moved around between hosts and it's been available the entire time.
That's pretty cool. So one of the other things we get questions on is the concept of cloud in the box.
Right. So this is what Docker is intended to do, is to wrap an application within an operating system. We could take that a step further, okay, and have it not just Docker-based applications, but any application, and then whether we do it as a container or we do it as a virtual machine, we just can treat that entire application as that. And with the ZFS snapshots and the replication, this allows us, from a developer standpoint, to easily replicate machines, create machines, have machines that are created, okay, just to do a specific test and then throw them away. And you can do this through templates, and let's touch a minute on templates. So from a container standpoint, say that we wanted to create a container here. So we could do a create CT, give it a host name of whatever. You have to give it a password. And then we have a share called OS ISOs. And within this OS ISOs, we have all of these templates, these predefined templates. And this allows us to create any one of a number of machine types, okay, from templates. Now, these are actually canned templates that are exactly that. They're applications that are wrapped in an OS that run as containers in this environment. So you have domain controllers, LAMP stacks, or Ruby, different operating systems. So the containers can run just about any type of Linux you could possibly imagine. So all of these are officially supported actually by Proxmox. If you want to create your own, you can do that too. We actually have a customer that was asking about running Oracle Linux, and there is no template for Oracle Linux, but we are able to create our own template for Oracle Linux and can fire that up. We have one of those here.
It looks like Mike has his hand raised. Mike, do you have a question?
I do. It's actually a comment. But at the last Dallas FMburgh meeting, they were discussing the Model Context Protocol, and it doesn't run the one Apple has on Claris. You have to use cloud resources. So the question came up at lunch after the meeting, can we do that as a template so you don't have to expose your proprietary data? And indeed, we can create templates in Proxmox. Although MCP from Claris is great, I can tell you for sure, Zerowait's not going to put our proprietary data on a cloud, and most of our customers won't. So we have to figure out ways to do these things on site, and Proxmox makes it really simple with the templates.
Yep, and we can do templates not just in these containerized environments, which are the officially sanctioned ones from Proxmox, but we can also create our own template. So if we go into, say, this Windows 11, we have the ability here to convert that to a template, and then we can duplicate that machine over and over again.
So with that, talk to me a little bit about network isolation.
So another thing that Proxmox allows us to do, if we go into the data center, and this is a cluster feature, So within this cluster, again, we've talked about that you have replication going on and that you have live migration going on. All these things can be isolated through these options can be isolated to completely separate networks. So you can have these as set up as VLANs. You can have these set up as completely isolated switches, different subnets, however you want to do it. Okay. You can have all this as segregated traffic. So the access to your environment is one network, maybe with one QoS strategy, and then your migration and or replication happens on another network or distinct networks from each other. And also within the networking, if we go into one of these machines, one of the hosts here, and look at the networking, you can also set up these as lag aggregates, okay, so that these can be set up so that they can, if you have stacked switches, you can have network ports going to distinct switches. You can have distinct network cards so that if a network card fails, everything keeps working. If a switch fails, everything keeps working. And again, you can do all of this, okay, in separately for your networking as well as, or for your replication as well as your migrations. All those can be separate lags.
Very cool. So does anybody else out there have any questions for me or for Ken or for Mike or for Scott?
Something else I wanted to mention is because this is based on open source, you have access to how the sausage is made on the back end. So whereas in a VMware environment, it's a very closed environment. You don't really have much access to what's going on behind the screen. With this, you have full access to everything. If we go into, there's a directory of etc PVE. And this is all replicated among all of the nodes. And you can actually, I'm not going to do it. I could if you really wanted me to. You can actually go in here and say, go into LXCs. And these are the machines that are, these are the individual machines that are running within, and this is NASB. So these are the ones that are running in NASB. You have 5013, 5014, 5018, 521, 5022. You can see that these correspond to these comp files. Now, if I take and copy this 5022 comp file out of this directory and put it in the corresponding directory in NAS A, it'll just magically move there because the replication has happened and there's a replication agreement between these two, and it'll just boot up over there. And same is true of VMs or replication agreements or anything to do with Proxmox. It kind of magically happens in this directory that just gets automatically replicated among all the nodes instantly.
Todd, do you have any questions? You want us to go into anything else?
I don't think I have any questions, just a lot of stuff to absorb and a lot of really cool stuff to consider for sure. Anybody else have a question?
As you can see, I've added a lot of things off script as we've gone along because there's just so much you can do with this environment.
So if there's no questions to wrap up, so The X14 system is really designed to supercharge FileMaker server and AI applications. Our enterprise clients really prefer Windows and Linux for enterprise class servers. And our solution provides virtualization via Proxmox with failover, ZFS for immutable storage, snapshots, and replication, customized to fit your application and network infrastructure, world-class maintenance. And one of the things that is noteworthy, we are all US based. Now, you may get a Texas accent here or there, but everybody's US based. Box is also scalable, predictable, and affordable. Was there a comment about the Texas accent? I don't think I have one, but some people say I do.
No comment about that, but I did come up with a question.
Go for it.
It's FileMaker and AI is, everybody's talking about AI. With just a single SimplStor, you could run your AI on the same machine, but you would just set that up in its own VM, correct? So they would either, whether
Absolutely.
that's a,
That's correct. And one of the things that that Proxmox allows you to do is it allows you to give away hardware resources down to the level of you can give a PCI slot to a container. So if you want to set up a GPU based container, you can say this GPU that is owned by this container. So then you can just set that up as a permanent compute node, okay, for AI. And anything that you send to it, okay, is basically you've created and again, with the concept of wrapping the OS around the application, okay, now you've created an AI application, okay, that you've wrapped around an OS, okay, that's in a container.
It goes back to that question that what came up in last month's Dallas FMburgh meeting with the mild text context protocol. We're going to be in the AI environment. We are in the AI environment, and the growth of the storage on those on the FileMaker systems, what they're going to be accessing is going to be enormous. And we've got the solution, a turnkey solution, because of the templates.
Okay. Very nice.
Is that?
We can touch for a moment on one of the real selling points of the X14. The X14 is an all NVMe system. And what that really means, if you're not familiar with that, NVMe is basically a 4x PCI slot. That's what NVMe slot is. It's just a different pin out for a PCI slot. And when we're talking about it being PCI 5.0, that means that you have PCI 5.0 speeds in every NVMe slot. And the X14s have 14 of them. Or I'm sorry, 24 of them. And every one of those NVMe slots is roughly equivalent in speed to a traditional HBA. So instead of having all of your storage in a slot at a given speed in one PCI slot, now all of your storage all has its own NVMe, all has its own PCIe slot. So the speed of that storage is exponential.
Thank you for bringing us together, Todd. You did a great job. And I'll come up and get a Primanti sub with you next time I'm in town.
Okay, yeah, please let me know, because I'll use any excuse to get Primantis. So
Where's
I think
that?
we could make that. It's a Pittsburgh thing, Ken.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the sandwich where you get your meat, your lettuce, your tomato, your French fries, all between two slices of bread. So it's
And it's very healthy eating with
sounds
sourdough rolls.
like it.
You get coleslaw too.
oh, that's it. Yeah, that's right. Coleslaw.
Yeah,
instead of
Coleslaw.
no lettuce,
That's yeah, that's right. The coleslaw.
You get all the 4 food groups.
Oh, there you go. All in one sandwich. It's
That's great.
It's a whole triangle.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining us.
Absolutely.
Before we move into the wrap up, as I hinted at the beginning, I invited my colleague Dawn, who's on our tech team and our resident Mac expert. Are you ready to go here, Dawn?
I think so.
Gonna give us a brief history of 50 years of Apple.
Okay, cool. So, good evening, everyone. As Todd mentioned, because today is a very special day for Apple, he said, could I just do a quick little talk to maybe tell us about the history of Apple for perspective of a Mac guy? So I figured I'll throw together a little slideshow, and in retrospect, I probably could have had AI just do all this, but I threw it all together. So it is a little bit crude, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to try to just get some of the highlights decade by decade of what I think were the important moments, products they announced. And when I made this, as a lot of things came out in the past 2 days with the anniversary, they had their own list of important products, and it matched mine, so I vindicated a little bit. First of all, what gives me the right to talk, so to speak? Who am I? My name is Don Kelly, and I never did answer your 2 questions. So I do like sourdough bread. In fact, I tried to order it tonight here at Eaton Park, but they didn't have any. And I just actually started, I need to shed a few pounds. So I started a walking regimen. Hopefully I'll continue. So I've been trying at least 4 days a week to try to walk. So there's a couple nice trails around. But back to the Mac side, I bought my first Mac in December 1998. A little later to the game, but before that, we had a Tandy Sensation PC. If anyone remembers the old Radio Shack one, so ran Windows 3. So the Mac was such an improvement over that. And after that, really never looked back. And then my first job, so to speak, out of college was at a Apple Specialist, which was a reseller. Before the Apple stores came, that's how they sold them, through independent resellers. And the Specialist designation was one of the highest level you could get as an independent reseller. So we did service, on-site service, classes, a retail showroom, and all that stuff. So it was a popular one. If anyone in the Pittsburgh area, was located in Cranberry. It closed, unfortunately, in October 2013, but I jumped right in the cross IT, so I've been there ever since. And the pic in the corner, if you can't really see it, but in the background, that is Apple Park. That's when I went to the visitor center at the Apple Park campus and stuff, and they one of the employees took a picture of me for that. So let's talk about where it began. Probably everyone's familiar with the story of the garage in Los Altos, California, where Apple was founded on April 1st, 1976 by 3 people. Now, everyone seems to know the Steves, so to speak, but there actually was a third person, that Ronald Wayne, but he doesn't get a lot of mention because he basically left after 12 days. He basically put in the capital, and he was the mediator between the two, the tiebreaker when they had conflicts, what they should go. And reading a story about that, he won, and he didn't feel that, like, investing his money, that this wasn't going to go anywhere. So he wanted to be bought out, I think, for $2,300. And they said if he would have kept his stock as of 2010, he'd been worth billions. So he kind of probably that time made a wrong decision, but they've interviewed him. He said at the right time, it was the right decision for him. He didn't get to become the billionaire like everyone else that grew up with Apple. So let's talk about the 70s, the beginnings. Of course, the first 2 computers were released in the 70s, the Apple I and the Apple II. And thanks for giving the pictures. Todd actually provided the 2 pictures of the Apple I and the Apple II. You could see there from the Computer Museum.
Yeah,
yep,
Computer
at Silicon
Museum.
Valley. Yep. So that's Apple I. It's in the wooden box. That's probably behind, I would imagine, a big glass case, because those are very valuable. There's very few in the wild, but essentially you could see the 2 Steves holding it. It was basically a circuit board they sold, and it was basically up to you to build a case for it. So a lot of people built wooden cases on that, and that's one displayed there. The Apple II, it actually came in a case with a keyboard, started to look more like a computer that we're familiar with. And then I put a picture of the 2 logos. If you could see a smart picture, that was their original logo with Newton, the apple falling on him. I guess thankfully they decided let's go for something a little more catchy, and then it became the Apple, the colored Apple that we all know. So let's jump into the 1980s. Some of the highlights, of course, the Apple III came out. Then the Lisa came out, and the Lisa was the first computer to use a graphical interface. Before then, it was all basically DOS and typing in, whereas the Lisa kind of was made more for document creation. I put the little screenshot of ClarisWorks. That was one of the early programs for documents, and we know the name Claris. So that was the first computer in that. Then another highlighted 80, Apple went public with their initial IPO in 1980. Was a good investment back then if you could still have your stock today. And I also wanted to mention that Apple at first also made printers. They were pretty big in the printer market. They made the ImageWriter and the LaserWriter. ImageWriter was one of the first matrix mass available printers, and LaserWriter, of course, first lasers. So a lot of people, when I worked at the Mac, were upset that Apple got out of the printer business. They always liked their printers, but they decided to focus on computers. Now, of course, this one deserves its own slide because in 1984, they released the Macintosh, and that's where we get the word Mac. Every computer now is a form of Mac, iMac, MacBook Pro, Mac Pro, which we'll talk about in a slide later. So the Macintosh in 1984 was the first version of the Macintosh. And how do we tell the world about that? Of course, I think we've all seen this. I'll talk about the plan, but that is the famous 1984 commercial that they played at the Super Bowl. It aired one time only, was directed by Ridley Scott, who did Blade Runner and Alien up to that point. And anytime when the Super Bowl rolls around, they usually do a list of the top Super Bowl commercials. And this is usually their number one or number two. And if it's not number one around here, I think we all know what usually is number one is the Mean Joe Green Coca-Cola commercial, but outside of Pittsburgh, this is usually always the number one commercial. So let it play through. And this, of course, is a take on IBM as Big Brother, and this is saying this is going to be a revolutionary new thing, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. So very famous commercial. So another product in the 80s that is infamous is the Newton. And I don't know if it's doing audio. It won't do the audio, but if anyone's Simpsons fan, if they remember the famous Simpsons scene where you'll see why the Newton was a failure. It was a neat concept where you were able to write a note in there and it would translate it into text. But as they make fun of in the Simpsons clip, it didn't work that well. So it was a commercial failure, but I put in here on the side, it could be considered almost a distant ancestor of the iPad and the iPhone because it was one of the first marketed PDAs, personal device assistants, or just basically a little handheld computer. So again, as many times they were in the forefront, but didn't have success then, but they would have success later for different products. The last thing in the 1980s I want to mention, of course, is the Steve's leave. Steve Wozniak left in 1986. He felt the company was going in the wrong direction. He was an engineer by trade, and he wanted to do more engineering. He didn't like the infighting that they had the Macintosh team and the Lisa team, so he decided to leave. He left on his own accord. Of course, the other Steve Jobs did not leave on his own accord. He was ousted in a power struggle with John Scully, who he hired from PepsiCo to become CEO. And they basically forced Steve out in 1985. But he would return, as we'll see, because let's go to the 90s now. Now, in the beginning of the 90s, Apple was becoming almost like a lost brand. It was a very niche computer, mostly for creatives that in the creative market, because this was really the time, the rise of the PC, which ran another software I'm sure we're familiar with called Windows. So as they became popular, Apple faded away. And if you remember some of the stores back then, the one where I got my first Mac, CompUSA, which was just down the road from here, they had the big store, I'd say 85% of it was all PC stuff. And then in the little corner, they had the little Mac section. And that's what you found is like the Mac was basically almost like an afterthought. They had a few things they called the clone program where you can run Macintosh in machines that weren't made by Apple. That was pretty much of a failure of a program. One note, the PowerPC was launched. That was the chip that Apple ran mostly through the 90s. But a big thing, in 1997, Steve Jobs actually returned to Apple, and that kind of started the resurrection of it becoming a standard today. Yeah, bless you. Another little highlight, they made a deal with Microsoft. You can see the one screenshot. That's a famous one where Steve is giving a little talk, and you have Bill Gates, ironically, Big Brother, like they did in 1984 commercial. But that deal actually helped them out immensely because Microsoft invested, I think, 150 million it was in Apple. And also they basically promised that they would continue to make Office for the Mac. So I think they acknowledged that Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that was basically the industry standard for doing those types of apps. So they said, Mac said, we need to be able to run that. So that helped them. They did, of course, the Think Different campaign, which, again, Apple memorabilia is worth a lot. There's some posters floating around there. Some of them are very, very pricey, worth a lot more, but there's a little snapshot of them. They used famous folks such as Martin Luther King, Jim Henson. I always wanted the Alfred Hitchcock one, which we at the store we had a collection of, but we never got that one. But I also want to mention Johnny Ive. Of course, he took a more of a design role in the 90s and designed some of the iconic products that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And for our group and stuff, I just wanted to put that FileMaker 1.0 was released in 1990. Now, Apple had been using database programs. I think it was, maybe you could confirm it's called Nutshell, I think was what it was called in the early 80s, but actually it became FileMaker, and 1.0 was released in 1990. So this is the one that kind of really started the resurrection. Unveiled in 1998, the iMac, the good old Bondi blue iMac that's iconic, that everyone, I wouldn't say take it for granted, but everyone seems to know what it is. And there's a picture of Steve announcing it. And I'm just do a little aside because this picture, that actually is my Bondi blue iMac. I no longer have, unfortunately. I should have kept it, but I got rid of it, just ran out of space in my house. But that was my introduction to Mac, and I learned to appreciate the Mac at Penn State, where I went to college. The one story I always tell is the computer labs, where we didn't have computers on our dorms or in our apartments. I had a word processor, but we would go to the computer labs, and there was like about maybe 20 PCs and then 3 little lone Macs again in the corner. There's always a line to access the PCs, never a line to access the Macs. So one day I was like, I don't feel like waiting. How different can it be? So I sat down at a Mac and I said, this is easy, and pretty much never looked back. So I remember I got home that fall break. I was like, Mom, I need an iMac. So we went to Christmas Eve, I believe it was 1998 when I bought it. And that led into the 2000s where, again, Apple was starting to rise. Some of the highlights here, Mac OS X was introduced. Up until then, it was Mac OS 8, Mac OS 9, but OS X kind of was a pretty much radical redesign. People hated it at first. I remember at the store, they were like, oh, can I still run 9? I want it. And for a while, they let you. They called it classic mode. But again, it grew, and it's grew into the operating system now. That. So also, they switched from PowerPC chips to Intel chips. That actually was a big switch because folks that ran Windows or needed to run Windows and maybe wanted to think of what would it be like to have a Mac. You could actually run Windows natively on a Mac. So that was all because of the Intel chip. And I know, especially some of my colleagues at work, and Todd knows who they are, they miss that because they like to be able to run Windows natively to access. So you got the best of both worlds. You can still do it through virtual machines such as Parallels, but not the same. Some of the other highlights, they had the iLife suite, which was iMovie, iPhoto, GarageBand, which is still running today. iTunes was a revolutionary product because that was the first major place where you could buy music. We all remember before then, Napster, LimeWire, where you wait for hours to download and hope you got a song, not a virus on there. So this was a legitimate way to buy songs. I always said if they had iTunes in the 90s, I could have saved so much money buying whole CDs for one song, where you could just buy one song. So we're not here all night. I'm going to kind of race through these and stuff. So I wanted to dedicate a couple slides to the products of the 2000s that deserve their own slides. The iPod, of course, that was introduced in October 2001 with 1,000 songs in your pocket. And of course, the biggie, the iPhone, which was introduced in January 2007, which 20th anniversary next year. The iPhone have brought a lot of people that don't necessarily have Mac computers, but wanted the smartphone. It's like, get the iPhone. So that's brought more people into the Mac fold that don't need the computer, but they're using an Apple product in the phone. So let's jump to the 2010s, some of the highlights. A few more game changers introduced, which I'll dedicate separate slides to them. Tim Cook, who is the current CEO of Apple, takes over in the 2010s. The Apple Park, there's a picture of that, the spaceship campus, so to speak, is built. And really, this was the decade where they became the world's most valuable brand. They actually became one of the first $1 trillion companies. Talking about another game changer, the iPad, which still used today and stuff, that was the rise of the tablet. Lots of competitors tried to, the iPad still considered the main one. So that was introduced in January 2010. And then, of course, unfortunately, we have to talk about this. Steve Jobs, the founder, CEO of Apple, he actually passed away in 2011. So his last public appearance was actually a presentation to the council about building the Apple Park campus. He had picked Tim Cook to be his successor. So Tim Cook did actually take over as CEO and still going strong today. So one of Tim's first major announcements of another game changer was the Apple Watch. So they've entered the wearable market. And again, bringing more people into the fold that necessarily don't have a computer. And I see Beth has one here. So yeah, wearing a watch. So has brought more people into that. And they also introduced a new operating system called watchOS to run it. And the last one in the 2010s, I'm going to mention AirPods. So that one of the first mainstream Bluetooth wireless headphones. And how many people walking down the street with those little white stems in their ears and stuff? That was a popular product. It was introduced in 2019. So the 2020s so far really marked the decade, the rise of services. So Apple started getting into the more of the service market with Apple News, Apple Fitness, Apple Arcade, different little services that you could buy. And again, that makes a revenue stream for them. The Apple TV Plus service, and that actually launched them into producing TV shows and movies. F1 was a highly touted one that came out. They won, I know they've won awards, and they've won an Oscar. I don't know if Coda won an Oscar, and I know that was nominated, but that got into the mainstream. Another big thing that happened this decade is Apple actually switched, as I mentioned, from Intel to their own in-house Apple Silicon. That was the M chips, which started with the M1. We're now on the M5. Very powerful chips. And I found they hold them so it's a lot better. We in our company are still running a lot of M1s that are doing fine. That it used to be upgrade every 2 or 3 years. Now it's getting harder to justify that because the computers are still running fine with the chips. They did the Mac OS and other OS renaming convention. So there was a couple of different, there was iOS 19 or 18, there was Mac OS 15 plus. So they were all different versions. So Apple said, hey, we're going to rebrand everything to a year. So now we're all on iOS, Mac OS 26. And in June, they will be announcing 27s. And of course, Apple Intelligence. Like it or hate it, you use it or not, that was an announcement that's been pretty popular. So one of the game changers they announced in the 2020s was the Apple Vision Pro. Kind of very expensive product, but if you've tried one, there's a picture of me wearing one. I don't own one. I can't afford that, but one of our customers had one, so they let us help them set it up and play around with them. If you've tried one, they are really neat. It's very visionary when you get into the immersive stuff, and what they created their own Vision OS. You could always go to your local Apple store and do a demo, and then just try to talk yourself into not spending $3,500 on one, because it really is a cool product. So what does the future hold? These are just a list of some rumored future products that are coming out. Of course, as with Apple, they're very secretive, so you never really know for sure, but you can read rumor sites and read tea leaves, so to speak. The one I would say is probably almost as certain as the foldable phone, which is supposed to be coming this September. So they're entering the folding phone market. I know they're working on smart glasses. They're talking about a home hub device, like a souped up version of an Alexa, much better. And that all depends on the smarter Siri, which hopefully is coming. They keep pushing it back, but the rumor is it's going to be coming in iOS 27 in September. So we'll see. Stay tuned. I wanted to put one little slide in between when Todd asked me to do this and making the slides. This actually happened last week, that they actually killed off the Mac Pro. That was a tower that essentially came out in its first form in '94. That was the Power Mac. Different iterations, got a G5, G3, G4, G5 chip, the Intel chip. They got the M chip, but then they decided they came out with the Mac Studio, much more affordable, and they weren't finding a market for it, so they essentially killed it off last week. So in true Apple fashion, just wanted to mention one more thing. Just if you want to get nostalgic about Apple and this 50th anniversary, I recommend just 3 movies. There's a lot more out there. There's documentaries out there, but these are 3 actually narrative movies about Apple and Steve Jobs or so. There's Pirates of Silicon Valley, which was a made-for-TV movie that's actually very good. It deals with both Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. So Noah Wiley, who the Pit locally, if anyone watches that, is in that. He plays Steve Jobs in that one. There's the infamous Jobs starring Ashton Kutcher, which is much maligned. I thought it was okay. It was entertaining, and I thought Ashton Kutcher really looks the part. He looks like Steve. And then there was the much more critically acclaimed Steve Jobs with Michael Fassbender, who did a good job. Doesn't look as much like him. It's suspension of disbelief. He does a good job portraying him. And then recommended reading, if may I, it's actually the one book here. This is a book, I mentioned this by David Pogue. This is Apple, the First 50 Years. This is a hardcover version of it here that I see Beth got. I actually bought the digital one, and a lot of these photos that I've used in this slide thing are from that book that I just took from there. David Pogue's a very good author. Written lots of books about Mac programs throughout the years. And then, of course, there's the Steve Jobs documentary, biography by Walter Isaacson that's very much critically acclaimed. So that is basically a lightning quick history of Apple. Just wanted to talk about it on this day of their 50th anniversary. So thank you for listening to me, and hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you, Don. So we're getting close to our time, so I do have a few slides that I want to share here just with some announcements. So the first one is just a public service announcement. In case of those of you who've been keeping track, there were, I think within the last 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, there have been updates to both Claris FileMaker Pro and Claris FileMaker Server. 22.0.6 are available. On FileMaker Server, you can see there it addresses a potential security issue related to the execution of system scripts schedules for scripts that are located outside of the scripts folder. That looked like a potential avenue of attack. So they've changed it so that you can only run system scripts that are now in the scripts folder. In FileMaker Pro, they addressed a rather weird issue specific to Mac OS Tahoe related to one-time verification codes, that if you happen to be hovering over a text field when the one-time verification code arrived. So I know I never experienced it, but it's been addressed. And they also addressed some performance issues related to container data loading times over HTTPS tunneling. And then, of course, you can check out the release notes for more details. Also, just wanted to continue to mention to folks that Full Access 2026 is happening in August. The dates are August 6th through the 10th. Here later this summer, it is back at the Jesuit Retreat Center in Los Altos, California, which is where it was at last year, for those of you that were there. Registration is currently open. They also have a general event schedule is available, but because this is an unconference, the attendees provide the sessions. So the session schedule has not been set yet, but you can see the tentative breakdown of what days and when the sessions are happening and that kind of thing. And then you can get more details there. fullaccess.us. Our next meeting will be May 6th, same time and channel. And I know I usually don't plan this far ahead, but just wanted to put this on everyone's radar. We typically do not meet in July because the first Wednesday of the month is always right around 4th of July and everybody's busy with the holiday and vacations potentially and those kinds of things. So the August meeting, though, we are meeting in July. We're going to meet on the last Wednesday of July for the August meeting, and that's to accommodate anyone who might be traveling to Full Access, since it would start the following Thursday. And since I am one of those people, I'm changing our schedule to suit me, so I hope you don't mind. Does anybody have one more thing? Anybody with a question for Ken or Chris or Mike or Dawn? I'll put Dawn on the spot too, since I can do that. I guess not. Oh, I guess in typical fashion, as we wrap up here, I do have one more thing I have to share, of course. I don't think I shared it at the last meeting, you may want to check your homeowner's insurance, because I found out that if anyone breaks into my house and steals my blankets, I'm not covered.
Is it just for the blankets
Just,
or for anything else?
just for the blankets, I'm not covered.
So,
Yeah,
so you don't have a blanket policy then?
I do not. I do not.
Yeah, huh?
That's good,
Very,
Chris.
very good. Again, Mike, Chris, Ken, Scott, thanks for joining us this evening.
It was
Appreciate
fun. It was fun. I
Absolutely.
really appreciate your time.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Have a great night, everyone.
See ya.